So in the book, you also discuss how you were not only a stellar baseball player, but also football player, that big game against Midland. And of course, Jim Abbott was what else? A quarterback. Talk to me about that game at Midland.
And a punter. I was a punter.
And a punter.
You know, football for me, I was sitting at home. It's a funny story. I had run a little cross country. I had played baseball in high school, and I was doing pretty well. And our varsity baseball coach at Flint Central High School, I come from the great town of Flint, Michigan, by the way. Is anybody here from Flint, Michigan that will admit it? Well, Flint to me was an incredible place to grow up because it was a tough town. Everyone knows that. And there was a lot of ways to get in trouble in Flint, and there were a lot of distractions. But it was also a great sports town, and there were great people there, people who took the time to help me to learn to do things in a new and different way, people who literally pulled me into the game and said, you can do this. You know, I tell the story a lot of my second grade teacher in my elementary school who taught me how to tie my shoes. You know, one day he came to class, and I didn't know how to tie my shoes at that point, and I used to go to school, and my mom and dad would double knot my shoes like 6 times over so it wouldn't come undone. And one day, Mr. Clarkson, my teacher, showed up to that classroom, and he pulled me out in the hallway, and he put a film on for the rest of the kids, and we sat chairs just like this, and he said, I got it. I figured out a way for you to tie your shoes. And that may not sound like a big deal, but he had 2 hands. And I think about him going home at night, using that clenched fist, working with the loops and the laces and pulling it tight. And that's the way I use to this day to tie my shoes because of his generosity, his open-mindedness. And football was the same way. I had never played football. The head football coach called me up and he said, Jim, we hear you have a pretty good left arm. We need a backup quarterback. Get down here. You're playing football. And I was on the phone and I said, hey, coach, I've never played football before. And he said, get down here. You're playing. And I walked down to that practice, and I didn't know how to put the pads on or the helmet or anything. And I walked out there, and everybody seemed to know exactly where they were going. And they all took time out of that practice. The center on the team, the head coach, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, to figure out how I could take the snap. That if I got down just a little bit lower, use my right forearm, that I could get the football out. And that I could hand the football off like this instead of like this. And it was just those little adjustments in Flint, Michigan that allowed me to play the game. And that's why I come from the great town of Flint, Michigan.
I'm tempted to say there's another famous resident from Flint, but why would I spoil the evening? Thank you for that. One of my favorite vignettes in the book is when Don Welke, the scout, comes to see you, drives his K-cart across Michigan, and then he writes up what he has seen. And under the heading, Jim Abbott, quote, left-handed pitcher, 6'3", 180, good arm, good changeup, makings of a breaking ball, natural cutter, big competitor, good athlete, plays football, good hitter. And then, as written in your book, over the final line, his pen hung over the paper for a moment before he added 4 more words, has no right hand, as if it's an afterthought, which I'm sure is the way you hoped he would evaluate you.
It was, and I never saw that. When Tim Brown, who was my great co-author on the book, he talked to Don Welke, who was the first scout who sort of believed in me and thought that I could play professional baseball. He scouted for the Toronto Blue Jays, and I heard that story later, and there was great debate when I was in high school because I was left-handed, and I threw in the low 90s. I was having good success, and normally a kid with 2 hands, left-handed, throwing in the low 90s would have the opportunity to play professional baseball. And yet there was this debate whether or not I could handle fielding the position or maybe handle a rundown. And Don Wilkie was the first scout who believed that I could handle that missing a right hand was an afterthought.
Bo Schembechler did not like your comparison between he and Fidel Castro. What happened?
Do we have any University of Michigan grads? Go blue, all right. Well, I went to the University of Michigan during the Bo Schembechler era. And you may all know Bo Schembechler, the great coach of the football team there, and a very imposing figure. You did not want to cross Bo Schembechler in any way, shape, or form in the city of Ann Arbor. And somehow, being young and dumb, I managed to do just that. I played on the United States team after my sophomore year. And we went down to Cuba. We were the first team to play against Cuba on their own soil, the first USA team to play against them in 25 years. And a big deal was made out of this series that we were going down to play in Havana. It was a 5-game series. At the time, the Cubans were thought of as the best amateur team in the world. Just incredible players. None of their players were yet making it across to play in the major leagues. So we went over there with all this fanfare, all this hype, and all this attention. A bunch of kids, sophomores, freshmen, junior, walked into this giant stadium, a lot like this. Not as pretty or as new, but called the Estadio Latino Americano in downtown Havana. And 50,000 people showed up to watch this first game. And they were jumping around, and musical instruments were going on everywhere. And we lined up for the introductions to the crowd, and this was 10 times as many people as we'd ever played in front of. And when the introductions were through, Fidel Castro walked down from the stands. He wanted to meet our team. The Cuban people were cheering and going crazy, and we didn't really quite know what to do, and we weren't too savvy with our Cuban history, so we lined up and shook hands with Fidel Castro and didn't think a whole lot more of it. We played the games and ended up winning. I won the first game 3 days later, beat the Cuban team, and went home, back to America, and did a press conference where some reporter in the back of the room said, "Hey, Jim, I heard you met Fidel Castro, and I know you go to the University of Michigan. Could you compare Fidel Castro and Bo Schembechler?" Now, being young and dumb and not knowing when to really duck a question, I started in. Well, I think they're kind of similar, very authoritative figures, you're kind of intimidated in their presence, blah, blah, blah. I went on, left the room, didn't think much more about it, got back to Ann Arbor that fall, and the equipment manager for the football team saw me in the athletic offices. He pulled me aside and he said, "What did you do?" I said, "What do you mean? You compared Fidel Castro to Bo Schembechler? How stupid are you? How stupid can you be?" I said, "Really? I didn't mean anything by it, John." He goes, "Well, I'll tell you what, Bo Schembechler's looking for you. You better hide. That's all I'm telling you. You better hide." So I used to cut through the athletic department to go to the baseball field because I did every day. So I never went through the athletic department again. I avoided it. One day it was really cold outside, so I thought I'd take my chances. I went through the athletic department, and sure enough, who's standing there but Bo Schembechler. He walked straight up to me, and he used to like me because I played baseball. He likes baseball. And he got about this far from my face, just like Fidel Castro. And he said, "What is this stuff comparing me to Castro?" I said, "I don't know, Coach, I don't know." And he said, "You better be getting to class, that's all I know. Get out of here." So, as Ozzie Guillen learned, do not touch Fidel Castro.